Hello, I'm Lauren Burke, founder, CEO, and chief marketer here at LJS Advisory. I'm here with our LJS client, Brian Murphy. Brian is a seasoned ad tech executive turned entrepreneur and, dare I say, sustainability champion. With the company he founded just 2 years ago, he is making the advertising industry more sustainable, one company at a time. I'm super excited to be here with Brian today, especially during Earth Month. So with that, why don't we dive into Brian's story and let him tell it as only he knows how. So Brian, welcome so much to this conversation with the Marketing Spice during Earth Month. So glad to have you here. To kick us off, can you just give a quick intro to yourself, your name, your location, and tell us a tiny bit more about your role and your company.
Sure. Well, thanks, Lauren. My name is Brian Murphy. I'm the founder of the Alpine Project. We are a business that helps companies in the advertising, media, and technology industry create and implement their environmental sustainability strategies and their corporate climate action plans so they can future-proof their business and unlock new revenue opportunities. I am based in the New York tri-state area, but our team of consultants is based all over the place, wherever our clients needed them to be.
Awesome. So, Brian, tell us about your story. So, you have a very illustrious ad tech background, having been at many successful companies. Tell us your founder story. What was your why behind founding Alpine Project?
Sure. So I started my career on the agency side. I've been in advertising the whole time, but I started on the agency side. And then I had the opportunity to get into ad tech really early. I was in ad tech back in the 90s. I was able to join the early team at DoubleClick. And my claim to fame is that I was the first person DoubleClick sent to a different country. So I opened up the DoubleClick London office and then the DoubleClick Dublin, Ireland office, kind of first boots on the ground with the whole Celtic Tiger movement. But that gave me kind of the entryway into this exciting new industry that's now grown to where it is today. And so over the last few years, I've had the chance to work at companies like Yahoo and Google. And then most recently, I ran buyer development for OpenX, one of the leading omni-channel global ad exchanges and supply-side platforms. And so when I was at OpenX, things were very different than back when I was at DoubleClick. Anybody who's looked at a LumaScape knows how fragmented and crowded the ad tech space has gotten.
Yeah.
And one of the things we realized at OpenX was that we needed real differentiation and alignment with our clients.
Yep.
And so the technology team at OpenX had made a decision back in 2019 to migrate the entire ad exchange from on-prem data centers over to the cloud. This was a decision for purely business purposes. Let's make our exchange more efficient. Let's save costs. But and the decision was made to migrate everything over to Google Cloud Platform, GCP specifically.
Okay.
And so when the migration was complete, the folks at Google said, hey, OpenX, you might want to run a greenhouse gas inventory because you're probably going to see a big reduction in your overall greenhouse gas emissions. And we didn't know what that was. This was completely new turf to us. But we had the good fortune of being able to bring in an expert, a guy named Dr. Bill Westcott, who had been working in climate innovation for 30 years. He's one of the co-authors of the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. And he guided us through this journey where we ran our first greenhouse gas inventory. We got our numbers. We had our data to start to analyze. And then we set a science-based target. And we actually realized that this journey that we'd been on by starting with this migration of the technology infrastructure, but also other things that had happened during this time period where we shut down a big office that we weren't using anymore because we'd switched over to a hybrid work policy following COVID, and other changes that were made to the business that weren't necessarily done for sustainability reasons, but ended up having a major impact on our greenhouse gas emissions. And so long story short, here's a company that kind of set out on this journey for business purposes, but ended up driving a 96% reduction in its greenhouse gas emissions from the baseline year of 2019 to just a few years later in 2022. So not only were we able to set a science-based target and be one of the first companies in the industry to do so, but we actually met what's called the SBTi, the Science-Based Targets Initiative's net zero standard, and be one of the first companies in any industry to do so. And so that was something that I had a front row seat for and was very much involved in. And I watched what this transformation did to our business. Number one, It changed the company culture. It had helped the employees of OpenX realize, hey, I work for a company that really cares about environmental sustainability. But more importantly, the companies that we wanted to do business with, particularly the brands and the big agencies, took notice.
Right.
And anybody who works in Adtech knows that it's all about getting on the agency preferred lists and getting partnerships with these big buyers. And we were able to close 2 specific agency partnerships almost entirely based on the fact that we had this new leadership position around corporate climate action.
Right.
And the big milestone that we hit was that OpenX was also the first company to be certified as a carbon neutral company. That was what really got the attention of the agencies.
Wow.
And so the reaction that I saw from the community right around the same time that this is becoming an important topic in the industry made me realize that, hey, we can help other companies, advertising agencies, ad tech platforms, and media companies go on this same journey. And that's how Alpine Project was born.
Wow, Brian, that is a tremendous story. And you've told me bits of it, but hearing kind of the full background and all the details really, shows how this, almost like accident turned into this massive, strategic move, which you're now paying forward and bringing to other companies, which is amazing. Some of the things like I took away from that and obviously getting to know your business a bit more, you're talking about greenhouse gas inventory, net zero standards, carbon neutral companies. Like these are terms that are, I wouldn't say they're fully commonplace, right? But you hear them now, like everybody in the industry, you have to kind of live under a rock if you haven't heard companies talking about this. But how many of your clients or just people in your network do you feel like really understand the difference between all these terms and like how each one, really contributes to, having, a sustainable company culture and strategy?
That's a great question. Part of what we do and part of our business isn't just helping our clients reach specific milestones, but it's also about just educating them, taking what we've learned through this journey and educating our clients. A lot of what we do is sometimes getting the work done first, right? And then helping our clients talk about the work that they've done to their employees, their stakeholders, their clients, their partners, because it is a completely different universe. It's a different vocabulary. We've got our own acronyms and vocabulary in advertising and ad tech, but this is now a whole new set of terminology that people need to understand, and they don't need to necessarily be experts on it. We're just trying to make sure that more people in our industry start to understand the fundamentals, because advertising as an industry is behind other industries. Like these, the greenhouse gas protocol was written in the 90s and implemented in the early 2000s.
Yep.
And have been adopted by thousands of companies. I think for the advertising sector, we probably thought, because we're a technology and services business, that it was somebody else's problem. We don't have factories, we don't have warehouses, we don't have delivery vehicles. But it turns out that advertising as an industry has a bigger carbon footprint than we thought.
Right.
Research that was done back in 2022 told us that the internet writ large, the digital economy, is responsible for about 3.7% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Wow. That's like on par with the commercial aviation industry. So we know that it's a bigger deal in our sector than we thought.
Yeah.
But then there's also the other issue of the fact that advertising is an industry whose almost sole purpose is to drive consumption. Yes. We are in the business of getting people to buy stuff sometimes that they don't need.
Yeah.
This is the industry that invented greenwashing. So part of what we do is very fundamental steps that we take our clients through, but a lot of it is also helping us as an industry understand that this is something that we should be paying attention to and get more familiar with.
Yeah. I mean, all fantastic points and just mind-blowing that our emissions is on par with the airline industry. You just wouldn't know, right? As just your, average working ad tech person. So talk to us a little bit more about the science-based target setting, because that's like a really important step in your process, right? So how do you go about doing that?
Well, I think it's even also really important to talk about, well, what is the science-based target and what is this organization that we've been hearing about called the Science-Based Targets Initiative?
Yeah.
So, because I think also known as SBTi, watching and following the Science-Based Targets Initiative and then understanding how that process works is a really important indicator of how our industry is making progress. So
Right.
the Science Based Targets Initiative is a nonprofit organization that was founded in 2015 as a way for companies and organizations to actually set targets to reduce emissions by a certain percent by a certain year across all three scopes, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3.
Yep.
So as to align around this global initiative to cap
Right.
global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius.
Yep.
Prior to 2015, any company could just go out there and say, we're going to reduce our emissions, and there were no checks and balances in place.
Right. Right.
Science-Based
Yep.
Targets Initiative basically provided this process by which a company needs to go through to make sure that the targets are aligned with broader goals and
Yep.
that they're also attainable, so that it's not just companies saying whatever they want.
Yeah. Yep.
So right now, as of today, there are 10,300 companies that you'll find listed in the SBTi target dashboard. That means that 10,300 companies have gone through a pretty rigorous process to start this journey of measuring their corporate emissions, scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3,
Yep.
and then figuring out how to calculate a target, set a target, and have it validated by SBTi.
Right.
If you've gone through that entire process, that means you take climate action pretty seriously.
Right.
So what we like to do is monitor, well, what does that mean for the advertising sector?
Yeah.
So if you look at like the Fortune 500, 54% of Fortune 500 companies can be found in the SBTi database.
Yep.
But if you just look at the top 25 ad spending brands, the big brands that spend the most money on advertising, 20 of them are in the SBTi database. And then if you look at the global advertising agency holding companies, really the big six, all six of the big six agency holding companies have also gone through this pretty rigorous process of setting
Right.
a science-based target. So that to me is an indicator that, okay, like the companies that fund our industry are taking this seriously,
Yeah.
which means that those of us in that supply chain, the companies that support the brands and the agencies, those economic buyers, we need to be taking it seriously too. And
Yeah.
so how does the process work? It's pretty straightforward. Company has to start by following the three fundamentals: measure, reduce, remove.
Yep.
Every year, following the right standards, guidelines, and protocols. And so that first step, that first measure step, begins with conducting a greenhouse gas inventory report.
Okay.
Usually you bring in somebody who can help you collect the data and translate it into the standard currency of carbon accounting, which is metric tons of CO2 equivalents.
Wow.
Or the electricity from your offices and data centers, the
Yeah.
fleet that your employees took, employee commuting, all this different data gets categorized following the greenhouse gas protocol into scopes 1, 2, and 3, all using this standard currency of metric tons of CO2 equivalents.
Right.
And when that process is complete, you've got your numbers, then you get it verified by an accredited impartial third party to make sure that everything was done correctly.
Yep.
And now you've got your greenhouse gas inventory report. And that's one of the first things that we do, usually the first thing that we do for any one of our clients.
Yep.
Now you've got your baseline data. Next step is to set your target. And that's where SBTi comes in. So you
Right.
take the data and say, hey, how can we start to make changes to our business that will not harm our business and not harm our chances for
Of
growth,
course.
eventually make us a more efficient business, but get us on a path to hitting these emissions reduction targets that we set through our commitment to the Science Based Targets Initiative. And now you've got your house in order, and now you've got your journey underway.
Right.
You go through that habit every year. That is just good business practice. That is what corporate climate action is meant to look like. And that's the first step that we take our clients through, so that they align with the companies that they want to do business with, the big brands and agencies.
That was a really good explanation. I feel like I learned so much in your like 2-minute overview there. But, you know, I think at the end of the day, like we're all here in service of our clients, right? So aligning your business goals with your clients' business goals is an absolute no-brainer, and I think can only yield success. And you've done this now for quite a few companies, you know, in your time at the Alpine Project. So, you know, would you say there's a specific client that is in the ad tech industry that is really relevant, or does it really apply to any and every company?
Well, the journey that we take our clients on usually starts with the same first steps, but then there's lots of other things that you can do. You got to get your house in order first.
Yeah.
But what we've got is we've got a couple of clients that have already they have come to us having already been running very efficient businesses for years. We've got clients that are punching way above their weight when it comes to the services and the offering that they bring to their buyers. And they're doing it in a way that's extremely energy efficient and low emissions. But they still want to make sure that they're taking the proper steps. And so once you've got your house in order, you've conducted your greenhouse gas inventory, you've set your target, one of the other steps that some of our clients take is they go for carbon neutral certification. Now, carbon neutral by definition is you've measured, you've reduced as much as you can, and then you invest in verified carbon offset projects to compensate for whatever your measured emissions are. That's what carbon neutral means. Now, carbon neutral is sometimes kind of a polarizing term because it is possible for companies to just pay their way to carbon neutral, which isn't really making real progress. And that's a valid point. But for companies that are already running extremely efficient businesses, carbon neutral is a really good step to take on your net zero journey. Net zero, remember, is you measure, reduce, remove. You measure, and then you reduce by at least 90% of your emissions or more, and then you remove what's left through verified offset projects. So there is a difference between the two, but we've got clients that are already so efficient that carbon neutral certification is a really good step for them to take. And let me be clear, saying you're carbon neutral is one thing. And I've seen companies in our sector just run press releases and saying, look at us, we're carbon neutral. You need somebody else to come in and validate or certify a claim. Otherwise, that's greenwashing. You don't want to do. And so we make sure that our clients go through a very rigorous process where somebody other than us, following protocols that have been set and designed for companies probably outside the ad sector, how did you measure? What standards did you follow? And specifically, what projects did you invest in to ensure that you are offsetting the measured emissions from your most recent greenhouse gas inventory report? We've got clients that have now gotten to that carbon neutral certification phase. Datonix is the first audience platform to be certified carbon neutral. Cargo, one of the leading mobile advertising platforms. Mobile Fuse also in the same category. All three of those companies have reached that carbon neutral certification, and they're all just getting started on their journey, but that's a really important step. We're really proud of them for that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it sounds like you really work with the gamut of companies, right? Whether you're like early stage, dipping your toes in sustainability versus like your house is sort of in order, right? But you just need that kind of validation to know that what you're doing is working. And I'm sure to give you more tips and tricks and strategies to become even more efficient, right? Because we don't know what we don't know when tackling some of these areas.
We've had companies come to us and say, "Hey, we're already a green business." Okay, great.
Yeah, let's unpack that.
Let's unpack it, but then let's back that up with some data, right?
Yeah, sure.
Because, and there are companies in Adtech that are actually doing really good things. They are running efficient businesses. They're bringing a more efficient manner by which to buy and sell online advertising, an industry that's got plenty of waste and inefficiencies in it. But if you haven't run your greenhouse gas inventory, you're just not really serious about climate action, and you just don't have the data to back up those claims. And there's people that are buying and selling green media products and green PMPs, and that's wonderful, and we should keep doing that. But if you aren't even getting the basics underway by conducting that first greenhouse gas inventory report, then we really don't know what kind of impact any of those decisions are going to make.
Right. Yeah, that's really good to know. So in terms of your role at the Alpine Project, right? Like you're doing a lot here, but what is your role in this process versus the client's role? And like what's kind of the superpower that you bring to this equation?
Great question. So my role as founder is that I'm wearing pretty much all the hats that you can wear, but we do have a wonderful team of carbon accountants and climate consultants, people that have been doing this for other companies in other sectors for years. What we've basically done is taken people that are really have subject matter expertise in how a greenhouse gas inventory works, how to engage with all these external organizations like the Science Based Targets Initiative, like the verifiers that we work with, like the nonprofit organizations, like the Climate Registry is an organization we partner with. But people that have been doing this for other businesses in other sectors and bring them into the advertising sector. Because in the advertising business, we love to do things our own way and maybe not necessarily follow the lead that's been set by other companies. But when it comes to this stuff, when it comes to climate action, the playbooks have already been written. The protocols and the standards and the frameworks are already out there. And so it's just important for us to play catch up with other sectors around the world and bring those standards and protocols into our industry and make sure we follow them. So Alpine Project is essentially a business that brings those subject matter experts into this industry. We teach them how the crazy, wacky world of advertising and ad tech works. But they are now helping the companies in our sector understand how the world of climate standards work.
Right.
And it's a great blend of expertise from both fields.
Yeah.
And then, my job is to make sure that all these different projects that we have underway are reaching their goals in a timely fashion. We want to get more companies in the ad sector to produce their reports, publicly disclose their data, get their targets set, and get their net zero journeys underway.
Yeah.
And part of my job is to just make sure that everybody is brought up to speed and being educated in how all this stuff works based on what I've learned by having the chance to work with some of these experts over the last few years.
Yeah.
And I've also taken some of that and brought it into some of the organizations with our industry. So I've had the opportunity to co-chair a working group within Net Zero, where we talk about this stuff with lots of other companies throughout the sector. We do it with the ANA, with the IAB Tech Lab. But as far as Alpine Project is concerned, we get our clients to do the work with real subject matter experts who have done it for other sectors. We get them on their journey and then teach them and their employees why this is important and how it can have a positive impact on their business.
Yeah, that's great. And when you were explaining to me a little bit about kind of your role, it seems like you're there to make the client shine, right? So they're the hero at the end of the day. You guys, to continue with this mountain analogy, like you guys are the Sherpas, kind of guiding them to the summit. But at the end of the day, it's them doing the work, so they get the credit, right?
Yeah. One of the things that I get really excited about is when we meet people that work for a company in the advertising industry, and they've built and assembled this green team or climate action team. It's usually organically grown. It's a bunch of like-minded people inside an organization. Sometimes it's a lot of the younger people in the company that realize, hey, we need to start a green team within our business so that we can really start to take action. And then they start to get smarter on this stuff. They get more well-educated on the subject matter and then pitch their senior leadership. Hey, we as a company need to start taking action. That's where I get really excited, because it's organically grown from inside the organization. And that's where some of the most exciting change starts to happen. And then those people who start those organizations, and they might start by doing a recycling program or a beach cleanup at an industry event. But eventually one of their goals is like, hey, we need to make sure that our company has its house in order.
Yeah.
We gotta future-proof our business, and we got to align with our clients who we know are taking this stuff seriously too. We also want to make sure that we just know and have the confidence that we're working for a company that takes environmental sustainability seriously.
100%. And, let's be clear that this is there's a feel-good aspect to it, right? And there's a talent acquisition and retention aspect to it, right? But it's a strategic business move at the end of the day. Can you talk a little bit about how you found that out yourself?
Well, so over the last few months, so starting in Q1 of this year, we have been conducting a survey. We ask our clients and we ask other companies that don't necessarily work with us, but have kind of launched their own climate action journey. Why'd you do it? What was the motivating factor behind your decision to implement an environmental sustainability strategy? And the answers came back in kind of three categories. The first one was strategic. We're doing this because it's the right thing to do for our business. We need to future-proof our business. We need to create differentiation for our business. We need to have better alignment with our buyers, with our clients and our partners. And that was the big one. That was over half of the respondents said that's the number one driver.
That is huge, right? That, almost half, and soon it will probably be the majority of people are looking at this strategically.
Then there's the other two categories, which number two was more like passion and culture. We're doing this because we want to build a culture around environmental sustainability, and that's where talent attraction and retention comes into play. Because we now know, based on research, that a high percentage of people that are looking for a job right now are going to factor into their decision-making process. Does this company take sustainability seriously? And then the third category is compliance. We went on this journey because somebody made us do it. And that can either be because of an investor
Right.
or who says, I need your EcoVadis score to be over a certain level, or a client that says, hey, we've got this RFI and you need to fill out this form that says, hey, tell me about your greenhouse gas data, tell me about your science target. Right now, strategic differentiation is a carrot. That is one of the big drivers.
Yep.
And culture and passion, that's a carrot.
Yeah.
Compliance is the stick. And this isn't that big right now, but it's coming. And if you follow what's happening in the state of California, the state of Illinois, and the state of New York, not to mention what's happening in the European Union, starting in Q1 of next year, there will be emissions data disclosure laws in place.
Wow.
Companies of a certain size that have to start disclosing this data. And it might not impact every company in Adtech, but it's going to impact all the companies that Adtech considers its economic buyers. The big brands and a lot of the big agencies are going to now have to disclose this. And if you're in their value chain, then you got to start reporting your data too, because the big companies' scope 3 emissions are the emissions that come from their business partnerships in their value chain, which means it will impact everybody. And so the clients that we work with are starting to realize that it's a nice to have now, but it's going to be a must have very soon. And they're just future proofing their business and getting ready for when the hammer drops.
Yeah. And you absolutely don't want to be, we'll say, last to market in this situation, right? That would not, bode well for your business. So what would you say to companies that maybe are hesitant to make these climate commitments for one reason or another, whether it's current political, economic issues, what have you, what would you say to them?
Well, I think the setting of a targets and getting your house in order is that first step. And for some companies, that can be a big leap. And I always tell people too, like, yes, we are in a time right now where perhaps environmental sustainability isn't being discussed as it was maybe 6 or 8 months ago, but it is still something that is happening, maybe not at the government level, but certainly at the corporate level. I mean, the fact that we are now at 10,300 companies that can be found listed in the SBTi database, when just 2 years ago it was barely 3,000.
Right.
As an indicator that this is something that businesses are taking very seriously. That is reason enough for a business to take it seriously too. But then there's this question of, okay, well, I'm going to set a target. How do I set a target in a way that's going to be meaningful and not just kicking the can down the road? And that's a really good question. And what we tell our clients is, get the basics and the fundamentals done first. Set that baseline year, conduct that first inventory, know your numbers. And then when it comes to setting a target, it's just really important to get your company listed in the SBTi database and actually make your target public. A lot of times we hear people say, how am I ever going to reduce my emissions by 42%, for example, by 2030? Which is a great question. And the thing that I always like to remind people is, number one, we won't really know until we start to analyze the data and analyze it 1 year to the next, where we really start to see how do certain changes to our business impact our greenhouse gas inventory data, particularly when companies are getting bigger and adding more employees. That poses a challenge.
Right.
The two things to remember is, number one, there are innovations and technologies out there that are going to make this more realistic in the future than it is today.
Right.
Because energy sources are going to be cleaner, and a lot of the purchased goods and services that drive a big category in scope 3 are going to get more efficient as well. But there's also something called an intensity target. And when it comes to your scope 3 emissions, you're allowed to factor in an intensity target, which means our emissions, when measured and divided by revenue or number of employees or some sort of metric that shows that, yes, while our overall number might be getting bigger, we as a company are getting more efficient when measured by units sold, revenue, or employees. And that helps people understand, okay, this isn't just a sum, a macro number that we're trying to reduce. We're just trying to become a more efficient business. And there's actually a silver lining here, because some of our clients realize when they start to look at ways to reduce emissions, they find new ways to save costs and become a more efficient business from a cost savings and improve the bottom line. Which isn't one of the benefits that we typically talk about. But it's actually sort of a hidden benefit that comes about when you've been doing this for a couple of years.
Yeah. And I think that's important now more than ever, given the economic environment, right? Like, if you can do the right thing while saving money, I mean, it's an absolute no-brainer. So definitely encourage folks to look at it from all angles, and just consider it. If you're not already considering doing this work, it's an absolute no-brainer. So it's Earth Month, but arguably we should be taking action around sustainability year-round, whether it's personally or from a corporate standpoint. So, what are some actionable next steps that you recommend folks watching us, listening to this? What can they take, to make, we'll say, a very concrete impact in the short term?
Well, certainly if you are working for a company in the advertising industry that has not taken the first step towards corporate climate action, I always encourage people, hey, if this is something that you're passionate about, number one is educate yourself and get smarter on that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we do for our clients is that we have a whole set of programs where we make them smarter on this stuff, not just the fundamentals on what are the difference between the scopes and carbon neutral versus net zero, and understanding some of the organizations that are tied to this world, but also just helping them actually form one of these green teams inside their organization so that they get smarter on the subject, but they do so as a group. I just, as I said, get really excited when I meet people who work on one of these green teams. And I think that's a really good first step that anybody in any organization can take.
Yeah.
But then as it pertains to the company, taking that first step of getting your climate action house in order is just a really key milestone for a company to hit. Get your numbers, get them verified, get them published, and now at least you can say that you've got your house in order and you can start your journey. And something else I'll say is that we have this wonderful organization in the ad sector called Ad Net Zero that started out of the UK's Ad Association a few years ago. 200 companies globally have now joined Ad Net Zero. Over 100 are here in the US chapter. Brands, agencies, production studios, media companies, ad tech platforms are now getting together and talking about how we make our industry more environmentally sustainable and get to an industry-wide target of net zero. And so my advice would be get smarter, get involved, start a green team, and join Ad Net Zero, because that's where a lot of these really important conversations are taking place.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Like any long journey, it starts with one step, and Brian can definitely help you take that first step with Alpine Project. So if clients want to get in touch with you, just to kind of touch base on this and, see where they can start, how can they do that, Brian?
Well, first off, you can follow us on LinkedIn. We're at Alpine Project on LinkedIn. The website is thealpineproject.net. And typically what we do is we schedule a call and do some discovery. We find out a little bit more about your business. We like to know the framework and the profile of the business. How big are you? How many employees? How many offices? How many data centers? And figure out if you qualify for the Alpine framework, this process that we take our qualified clients through so as to come out the other side with that all-important greenhouse gas inventory report and your science-based target, and then get you launched on that net zero journey. So we are thrilled to talk to companies that want to take that first step and figure out where they go from there.
Sounds great. And everyone watching this, we will actually have a couple of Brian's clients join us and talk about their sustainability journeys and some of the impact and differentiation that working with Alpine Project and doing the sustainability work has brought to their organization. So we're super excited to have them as a fast follow to this episode. So you'll want to continue to pay attention and pay attention to those when they drop. So thank you so much, Brian, for joining us today, talking about what it is you do. You really are a sustainability champion. You have showed me that in the last 35 minutes. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing what's to come from the Alpine Project.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.